In this video, we give an overview of all the actions available for EDIUS on Magic Automa. Here we have the EDIUS icon, and by right-clicking we can open the EDIUS settings menu on Magic Automa. We can launch EDIUS if it is closed. We can enable or disable EDIUS in case we don't use it. Let's go to the settings. Here we have the path of the executable. Load the path of EDIUS directly from the running applications. Or we specify the path using the Browse button. Everything is detected automatically, but we have all the tools to specify it if it is not detected. Here we have the Quick Keys section. In case you are working with a keyboard other than the default one, you can load the custom keyboard here. In order to specify to Magic Automa what your customized hotkeys are, here we have some very important options. You can leave everything as default for the recognition of EDIUS panels and effects. For some EDIUS 8 users, it is convenient to use Method 3. From EDIUS 9 onwards, Method 1 is infallible. Here we can decide how many effects folders to load at startup. If I set one, I load only the first effects folder. In the EDIUS Hotkeys window, the cyan hotkeys are unassigned hotkeys. The blue ones are the assigned hotkeys. I can do a test to launch the associated function, or copy the function text to paste it later when I create a macro. We can also directly create a macro that executes a hotkey and establish in which window to apply the new macro. In this case, EDIUS window. In these two fields, we can search for a command by name or by assigned hotkey. In this field, I type the hotkey and the command is found. Let's do a test, and we can see that the dialog for changing the speed will open. To summarize, in this screen, we're going to see all the EDIUS hotkeys. The commands in this case are in Italian because my system was initialized in Italian, but by default it is in your own language or English. Hotkeys are a core part of Magic Auto macros, so it's important to understand them. EDIUS effect, we have already said before that it is the number of folders that we load in Magic Automa. The folders not included will not be seen by Magic Automa. Here I can also do an application test of the effect. Then we have the recognition of EDIUS windows with the 3 methods, but this is only for debugging in case of malfunction. Generally, all EDIUS panels are recognized immediately. Here there is a button to check the routes. Now let's see the creation of macros, the various possibilities. First, we created a new project macro. If I click on it, you see that I am asked to save the current one to create another one. Let's create a macro. This screen opens. Enter the name, description, and label of the button, and very importantly, select the target application. You can add an icon, a shortcut key to directly launch the macro. You can set a voice command. You can have this macro saved on your own cloud, and then be reloaded on another computer. I can also make my macro public for the whole community to see. Here we select the operating system in which the macro can be applied. Only Windows in this case. Now I click on the Add button to insert a new action. We specified that this macro is for EDIUS. All actions for EDIUS and actions common to all applications are enabled. Now let's look in detail at the specific actions for EDIUS. Let's create a macro for every type of possible action. EDIUS clip color will have to change the color of the clip representation in the timeline. Let's make a duplication of this macro and make it orange, for example. Now let's create a context menu type action. This type of action simulates the mouse click to open the context menu on any object. Then click the object with the mouse and then run the macro. Anywhere on the screen on EDIUS, you can have a context menu that can be managed. I want to open the time effect menu and go to field options. You can create cascading menu actions for infinitely nested menus. Let's save the action and see. The cut frames action type cuts the initial and final part of the selected clip. Let's create a macro by setting 1 second and 5 input and output frames. Let's save the action. The macro worked. Now let's create a clip duration action. Let's set the duration of the clip to 3 seconds. We expand the grid to be able to add buttons. Let's add and apply effect type action. Where we can select an effect from the tree of loaded effects. For example, let's go look for Mercalli. Here you can also define whether the effect settings panel is opened. But let's first create a macro that only applies the effect. As you can see, the Mercalli effect has been added to the clip selected in the timeline. Here you can also see the Mercalli analysis request message. Now, let's add the opening setting of the filter settings panel. At the end of this video, we will see how to click on the Analyze and Close button. The next EDIUS action of type fade, which creates a fade in the mixer and audio channel on an input and output clip of a specified time. Let's now create a menu bar type action, similar to the context menu bar, but which acts on the EDIUS menu bar. For example, let's create a macro that clicks on the File menu, and then Import Project, and then EDL. We write in this format. Let's create a new macro with the menu bar type action. At clip menu. Let's now create a panel focus type action. This type of action brings an EDIUS panel to the foreground. We select Bin Panel. This action is mainly used for complex macros to give focus to a panel and then perform other actions on the selected panel. We are on the Information panel. We should activate the Bin panel. Let's create another macro of this type for the Marker panel. Now we create a macro with the action type of Select Sequence type. This type of action opens a specified sequence. We have Sequence 1 and Sequence 1. Let's create a macro with the shortcut action type. We have already seen shortcut at the beginning, and we have seen that they're the rapid keys assigned by EDIUS. So these are all the functions of EDIUS. If we know the hotkey of the command we are looking for, we can search for it with the hotkey. Otherwise, by name or description. I know that the Alt+E key is used to open the speed change dialog. I'll make a macro that opens the speed change dialog. You see the speed change panel has opened. At this point, I can continue the macro and add a text and write, for example, 50. You saw that he also wrote 50. I can click OK or press Enter, and a speed change is applied. Now let's create a clip speed macro. This type of action is precisely the complete management of the speed change panel with all its options, up to also applying the optical flow. I create a macro that applies an inverse speed of 50%. And that changes the duration of the clip in the timeline. At this point, we have created at least one macro for all actions for EDIUS. So let's finally see the most difficult and sophisticated type of action for EDIUS. EDIUS UI control. This type of action has a picker which, when creating the macro, selects the object we want to control on EDIUS. With the mouse, I hover over the EDIUS objects. I can select them and capture the information to be able to act on that object in a macro. The strong point of this type of action is that even if the objects move on the screen, they will be found again, either by text or by automation ID, unlike clicking with fixed coordinates. For example, we select the button to open the vectorscope, click and store the object. From this moment, even if I move the timeline, the vectorscope will still be found. You could think of doing this macro using the mouse action type, but this is not possible because if the window moves, the click would always be in the same point. Instead, the UI control action type searches for the object wherever it is on the screen, even if I change the graphic layout. If I change the position of the timeline, this button is always pressed wherever it is. I'll review the picker tool. For example, if I want to create a macro that toggles the snap event, I can easily do it. We have made an overview of all types of actions for EDIUS. We repeat that EDIUS, in addition to its priority actions, can exploit all the other types of generic actions, which we can see in this list. In the part of the video where we show the application of the effects, we created a macro that applied the Mercalli effect. Now that we know the UI control action type, we can improve it. The Mercalli panel needs you to click on the Analyze button and then close it. So I added two UI control type actions that click on the Analyze button and the Close button. Here I specified that when the ProDAD Mercalli window opens and you find an Analyze button, you have to press it. Once the analysis process is finished, press the Close button. With a timeout of 600 seconds. So if the analysis lasts more than 10 minutes, the macro does not click on the Close button. Clearly, these times can be changed. This is another way of how to use UI control. Now let's see the macro repeat function, and this function on EDIUS will be very useful to us, especially to apply the same macro to subsequent clips in the timeline. For example, I created a speed minus 50% macro and a macro that selects the next clip. Let's see how to apply the same macro several times. Now I'll explain it to you in detail. Here we select the filter to filter the macros of the application we are using, and select the macro that needs to be repeated. I set the number of repetitions to perform. And here I have to put the intermediate macro, which in our case is the macro that must move the focus to the next clip with a delay before and after. Let's see what happens. The main macro is applied. Speed, the intermediate macro is applied. Move the focus to the next clip, and then the cycle repeats for the number of times established by us. Let's say that this function solves a lack of EDIUS, which would be that if I select 3 clips and apply speed, it does not lengthen the clips at the same time. You have to do it one at a time. Clearly, you can do many things with your period. Bye. See you in the next video.